It's not uncommon for veteran musical artists to hit a streak of predictable and mediocre at best albums whenever they get deep into their catalog, like beyond 10 albums. But every now and then they'll turn around and they'll come out with something new that actually surprises you. It's a surprisingly good album. And it's not that maybe you didn't enjoy the previous albums, but this one is definitely a clear standout. Perhaps the best example of this happening is with Johnny Cash and the American Recordings albums that he put out through the 90s and the early 2000s. And he enjoyed a massive resurgence in popularity and gained a lot of new fans. A couple more recent examples of something like this happening would be like last year's Judas Priest album Firepower, or even this year with Bruce Hornsby's album Absolute Zero. Both of these albums were very surprising in the quality and the energy that was put behind them. The change in style for Bruce Hornsby, or the reinvigoration and the harkening back to a more fondly remembered time in Judas Priest's discography. Other times when you get this deep into a discography, things don't work out so well, and you get something like Madame X, the new album from Madonna. For the people who crawled out from under the rocks where they live, Madonna is a pop artist who set the mold for the modern pop diva back in the 80s and 90s. And she's basically the standard by which all modern pop stars are measured today. Madame X is Madonna's 14th studio album, and it is very heavily influenced by Latin and Portuguese music, with many of the lyrics actually being in Portuguese or Spanish. And this is likely inspired by the recent years where Madonna has lived in Lisbon. According to interviews and promotional material, Madame X, the title, comes from this new alter ego that Madonna is introducing on this album, where Madame X is like this secret agent, a master of disguise. She can become whoever she wants to be. And that's hinting at the multiple influences that she pulls from throughout this album. She's being different people in almost every song. And on the surface, that actually sounds like a really cool idea for a pop album, and a really interesting challenge for any pop artist, and would probably translate into a really interesting album if it's done well. However, the end result that we have here leaves quite a bit to be desired. Now, before we get too far, I'm going to address the obvious. Yes, the album artwork that I have here next to my head is the artwork for the deluxe version of this album. The reason being is that is the version that was available to me on streaming services, and so it's the one that I listened to. And also, whenever I did research, I found out that the 2 additional tracks that were added onto the deluxe version are not just tacked onto the end like you would normally have with the deluxe album with bonus tracks. They are actually mixed into the regular track list, which tells me this is the version that they want to present with this deluxe version. So I am going to review it as it sits here with those 2 additional tracks. Now, the fact that this exists, and this is also one of 5 different versions of this album that you can buy, is almost automatically points against it, but that's a subject for another video. Now, moving on, this album, like I said, is rather bad. And I figure the best way to go through this is to just go through it track by track. And it's 15 tracks long, so this is gonna get long. I'm gonna try to go as fast as I can, but it's gonna get long, so buckle up. Kicking things off on Madame X is the song Medellin, which was one of the promotional singles featuring Maluma. And this is overall just a pretty unremarkable Latin pop tune that has a serviceable beat on the chorus, but the vocal processing on Madonna's voice ends up making her sound like a GLaDOS from the Portal games. And it's just really distracting, and then the rest of the song just really doesn't have much to offer. Next up is Dark Ballet, which is by far the worst track on this album. It's this awkward art pop attempt that has more vocal processing and a sample of the Dance of the Reed Flutes from Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker, and a very laughable spoken word section at the end. The whole thing is just clumsy in all of its parts. It doesn't come together well at all, and it just really doesn't fit in with everything else on this album. It kind of sticks out, and it's not the only one that does. And getting that out of the way, we move on to God Control, which is a political song about gun violence in America, but it more seems to just repeat platitudes rather than inspire any positive action. The verses sound like she's singing through clenched teeth, and then it does this whiplash-inducing switch to a Daft Punk-esque disco sound, like their Random Access Memories era, and it has more bad, distracting vocal processing. Up next is Future featuring Quavo from Migos, which is mostly just a forgettable pop tune that it failed to stick in my head in any way, good or bad. With a couple little hints at Latin pop. I can't really say much about it, so we're going to move on to track number 5, which is Batuca, which actually has one of the more interesting beats on the album, which is provided by the Batucadeiros Orchestra from Portugal. However, the vocals are uninspired, and there's even more vocal processing that makes her sound like GLaDOS from Portal. After that, we have Killers Who Are Partying, which is a very long and drawn out and boring song. It's another political song which draws attention to marginalized people. And while Madonna herself is very generous and very philanthropic, because of the shallow nature of the lyrics that she chooses to use in this song and the way that they're presented, if you didn't know all the charity work that Madonna has done, this would come across as just lazy virtue signaling. After that, we have Crave, which features Sway Lee, another trap artist. And as you can guess, this song is a trap-inspired pop tune, but it is only trap in the most generic and basic sense of the genre. And once again, like the previous song with Quavo, it's just really kind of forgettable. And in the verses, Madonna is like borderline mumbling. Up next is Crazy, which is just a basic pop song with forgettable verses and an annoying chorus, and the song goes on about a minute longer than it should. And it overall just kind of feels like an unfinished draft of a song. After that is Come Alive, which is tolerable with a somewhat interesting beat, but it has a very highly repetitive chorus. And even though, like I said, it's tolerable, it's still not really a standout. There's nothing that really makes it stick for me. After that, we have Extreme Occident on the deluxe version, which is the first extra track that has been added for the deluxe version, and this one is another just really drawn out track. It has really nothing to hold your attention until the bigger beat drops in the last quarter of the song. Nothing really memorable in lyrics or melodically leading up to that point. Up next is Faz Gostoso, which features the Brazilian singer Anitta. Now, this is a cover of a song that was super popular in Portugal, and it actually ends up being one of the better tracks on this album. But let it sink in for a moment that one of the best tracks on a Madonna album is a cover song. And even being one of the better tracks, it's not really inspiring any repeat listens for me. After that, we have Bitch I'm Loca, which is another song featuring Maluma. It is a very heavily Latin-influenced reggaeton-style song. And once again, this is one of the better tracks. And the reason why, I believe, is because it actually has Madonna digging a little deeper and fully exploring another genre of music, unlike she's done on the rest of the album. And that's kind of the same reason why Faz Gostoso is so good, is because as a cover song, it is fully leaning into that Portuguese style of music. Right after that, one to, like half-decent punch, we end up with I Don't Search, I Find, which takes a real quick downturn. It is a whiplash-inducing change to a 90s house and like neo-disco sound. That's really just another jarring use of another genre on this album. It just, once again, sticks out like a real sore thumb, kind of like the dark ballet or the disco turn that God Control takes. And this song, it might have been cool about 25 years ago, but not so much anymore. After that, we have Looking for Mercy, which is the second extra track that is added onto the deluxe version. And it's actually one of the very few moments on this album where we're actually treated to Madonna's singing talent. It's just unfortunate that it's on a track with a bland instrumental, flat verses, and a highly repetitive chorus. And rounding out the 15 tracks on this album is I Rise, which is another political song about gun violence that actually samples the survivors of the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting. And this song is clearly trying to be an inspiring and anthemic song, like a call to action, but it ultimately ends up failing at really being inspiring at all. As I was sitting listening to it, I'm like, okay, I see what you're trying to do here, but it could have been made better and even more inspiring, and I wish it had a little bit more of a punch to it. So yeah, there you go, 15 tracks with only a very, very small handful of tracks that are even decent. And they're both only so much so because they lean harder into the world influence that she's trying to go for on it. And that's perhaps my biggest complaint with this entire album, is that Madonna is trying to sell us on her experimenting with other genres and styles, but she ends up minimizing that influence so much that all we're left with is a bunch of tracks that are just ultimately really bland pop songs that aren't really memorable. So overall, I give Madame X a 1 out of 5. This is a very poor sampling of watered down pop music that only hints at the far-flung influences that were promised. And it severely underutilizes the talents of a pop icon. So now that I've just finished making everyone angry, I'm gonna move on to my other suggestions that have come out this week. Almost on the complete opposite end of the spectrum of a veteran artist coming out with something new is Bruce Springsteen's Western Stars album that's out now. And it is a surprisingly well put together country influenced album. It's far from perfect. Some of the arrangements are kind of iffy and some of the songs don't exactly work, but I ended up enjoying a new Bruce Springsteen album a lot more than I thought I would. Up next, as usual, in the metal world, there were a lot of good releases. It was kind of hard to pick the one I wanted to suggest to you guys, but I'm going to give you Serpent of Gnosis. The album is called As I Drink from the Infinite Well of Inebriation. This is a band made up of members of Job for a Cowboy and the Black Dahlia Murder, and it is a blistering, fast, and absolutely brutal grindcore, deathcore type of offering here. It is just absolutely insane. It's just 20 minutes of pure brutality. And yeah, if you're into that kind of thing, don't miss it. Finally, I'm going to suggest Terraformer by Thank You Scientist. This one is a double album from a prog rock group for people who like their prog with a dose of jazz fusion. They have horns and lots of wonderful noodly bits that all you prog guys like. It's a pretty good one if you like that sort of stuff, so don't miss that one either. But that's going to do it for this round of Continuous Thunder. I'm pretty sure I made most of you angry, so go ahead and just leave in the comments why you think I'm wrong or why you think I'm the worst person on the planet. If you feel like being a little nicer to me, why don't you go down there and tell me your favorite album that came out late in an artist's catalog that surprised you, that you thought was better than a lot of the previous offerings. Quick reminder that you can follow this channel on Instagram and Twitter at CT Music Review. The handles are on the screen and there'll be links down in the description, along with links to all of my suggested albums. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.